Hello biology kids. Today we're going to have some notes on chapter 2.3 properties of matter. We're going to focus a lot on water because water is probably one of the most important compounds that we deal with every single day. So water and solutions. Polarity. Now think of a magnet. A magnet has poles, a north pole and a south pole. So when you think of polarity, you think about it that way. That two north end poles on a magnet will repel and a south and a north pole will attract to each other. So opposites attract and likes repel. It's the same idea for water, or it's just easier to see in a magnet because we can see that, and water is tiny molecules so we can't see it. So polarity. Polar means an uneven distribution of charge throughout. So how the electrons go around the atoms when they make that bond. It's uneven of the charge in the electrons makes it polar, and a water molecule is polar. So the polarity of the water allows it to dissolve other polar compounds like sodium chloride, potassium chloride. So polarity allows water to do lots of different things. So to understand that it's got the polarity means it's got slight charges to it, slight positive, slight negative, so it can be attracted or repelled from other things due to that polarity like a magnet. Hydrogen bonding is another characteristic of water. What it means is that the intermolecular means between two different things. So intermolecular bond between hydrogen of one molecule and the hydrogen, oxygen, or nitrogen of another molecule. So it's a type of bond holding water molecules next to water molecules or water molecules to something else or anything with hydrogen. It makes many unique characteristics of water. The major one is ice is less dense than liquid. So solid water is less dense than liquid water, which is the only thing I know of that acts like that. Because generally we think that a solid has packed molecules or packed atoms tightly close together that are hardly moving, and that would make it be more dense than the liquid water where the molecules move across each other a little bit and are spread out. But water is the only thing that I'm aware of that the solid or ice is less dense than liquid. That's why your ice cubes float, which is a pretty interesting thing for lakes in Minnesota. Can you imagine if ice didn't float? Then we'd have frozen lakes from the bottom up and fish would be frozen in there, and we wouldn't have the lakes we do today if we did not have this unique characteristic, which is really interesting. So cohesion and adhesion are also characteristics of water. Co means together, ad means, I don't know, kind of different. So cohesion is the attraction between like things. So when it's a cohesive thing, when you guys have a cohesive group, whether it be a group of friends or a basketball team or a team of anything or organization, you call it cohesive because you like things you're tight-knit. It's an attraction between like things. So cohesion is when water molecules like to stick to other water molecules. Because they're polar, they have those slight positive, slight negative ends. They tend to be attracted to each other. The opposites attract, so the slight positive from one water molecule attracts the slight negative of the oxygen of the other, so they're cohesive. Surface tension, if cohesion is the force of water molecules causes tension on the surface. If you try to pop a bubble, or pepper will actually float on top of water, and I'll demonstrate that for you later. Pepper floats on there, but if you put soap, detergent on there, it actually breaks that tension because that's why soap and detergents work. So surface tension is the cohesive forces of water, the tension on the surface, so the surface holds together as they have in this picture to the right. Adhesion is the attraction of things between two different things. So cohesion was the same thing. Adhesion is the attraction between two different things. So every type of tape that you use, like a Band-Aid or whatever it says, Band-Aids say adhesive. So an adhesive strip means that it's attracted to something. So tape is sticky to skin, is an adhesive thing. And capillary action. Think of capillary as little tubes. So we had little xylem and phloem or tubes up a stem. We have cardiovascular, our arteries and veins are kind of capillary things. There's capillaries too for that. So capillary action is the attraction between molecules that results in the rise of the water of the surface of a liquid when its contents. So water goes up a tree. So capillary action is the attraction between molecules that writes the. So when I put a paper towel in a thing of water, it's going to absorb it. When you have paper towel and you leave it and it's next to the water, it'll start absorbing the water. That's capillary action. It'll spread out and be collected in there. So you've seen this demo before where the celery gets water, different color. Temperature moderation. Water has a high heat capacity. Capacity means the ability to carry, like your bus seat capacity might be 65 or 72. So heat capacity is how much energy or heat a substance can contain. And water has a very high heat capacity compared to other things, which means water can absorb or release relatively large amounts of heat with only a slight change in temperature. Here's an example for you. Let's think of lakes, since we have our 10,000 in Minnesota. Let's talk about lakes. In the spring of the year, it starts getting warm. The last few springs it's been really warm in April, even in March. The question is, if it's been 80 degrees for 3 or 5 days straight, does that mean the water's ready to jump into? How many of you guys would jump into water in a lake of water first week of May? It's still chilly because water has such a high heat capacity. That lake might see the sunshine. It might be 80 degrees for 5 days, but the lake, because it's such a huge body of water with a high specific heat, it will not heat up. It takes lots of days. Just like it doesn't get really cold at night because it's high as a high. Once it's hot, it's going to stay warm. So it's still warm even in September when it's cooling off at nights. The water's still pretty comfortable. That's that characteristic of water. As a liquid evaporates, the surface of the liquid that remains behind cools. So it's dealing with temperature. As a liquid, any liquid evaporates, the surface of a liquid that remains behind cools. This is why we perspire. Our body sweats because then water come out along with in that sweat there's some uric acid stuff. That's the smelly stuff. What happens is the water in our sweat will evaporate, and that evaporation causes a cooling sensation. If you guys ever put rubbing alcohol, like if you have earrings or something, you put rubbing alcohol, you spray rubbing alcohol or spill it on you, you really cool because it evaporates so much faster than water. So that's liquid evaporates. That's why we sweat. Solutions. A solution is a mixture in which one or more substances are uniformly distributed in another substance. So you guys drink soda and you have flavoring in there and caffeine are in there. That's a solution. Kool-Aid is a solution because there's sugar and Kool-Aid flavor dissolved in water. So it looks the same. Milk is a solution. Air is a solution because it's a mix of a bunch of chemicals. So soda, air. And then there's parts to the solution. The solute is the thing being dissolved. So it'd be like the sugar in your soda or sugar in the Kool-Aid. And the solvent is the substance doing the dissolving. So in most cases, water is the solvent, which means water is the universal solvent because it actually does the most amount of dissolving of anything. Water is the universal solvent because it dissolves so many things. And a saturated solution means no more solute can dissolve. So I think of a sponge. A dry sponge is unsaturated because it can absorb more water. A full sponge full of water or whatever you're trying to wipe up is saturated because no more can be absorbed. And supersaturated would be overflowing. So saturated solutions, no more solute can dissolve. Now I want you to listen to these acids and bases notes. You don't have to write these down, just listen, because we've had some conversations about acids and bases. I'm just going to give you the chemistry behind it to see where you're at, so you don't need to write these down. Water molecule will split apart. What happens is we have water, which is H2O, splits into H and an OH. It's called hydrogen ion and hydroxide ion. They're charged particles. You can see the charges on them. OH is considered a hydroxide ion, and this H can be react with an H2O to make hydronium ion. And so when we deal with acids and bases, we deal with hydroxides and hydronium. So the acidity or the alkalinity, which is how basic it is determined by the amount of presence in each. So acids has more hydronium ions than hydroxide ions. So hydrochloric acid, which is the stomach acid, vinegar, any of your citric acids in your fruits, your grapefruit and oranges, are acids. And bases, on the other hand, have more hydroxide ions than hydronium. So sodium hydroxide and ammonia will actually be bases. Any of your detergents and your soaps tend to be basic in structure due to this. And we talked about pH. What pH means is the power of hydrogen. The scale is from 0 to 14. Hopefully you guys remember acids are less than 7, neutral is 7, and bases are greater than 7. And so this power of hydrogen, the pH comes from, it can actually measure the amount of hydronium in there. So then you can go from there. So that's a simple message on that. Buffers, again, you don't need to be writing these down, just listen to me. Buffers are controlling the pH very different, which means, well, controlling your pH of your body is very, very important, because what they say is if we actually had more of a basic body, or body was more alkaline or basic in nature, we would actually be better off. Our blood is slightly basic at 8.4, or excuse me, around 8. Other things aren't, but we put everything in our body tends to be acid, because pop's acid. Just everything seems to be, all the fruits we eat are more acidic. So the pH is very, very important, and we can put things in such as buffers. By the way, enzymes are very sensitive to pH, and enzymes, as a quick review, catalyze or speed up chemical reactions. So if the pH of your body isn't right for that enzyme, it's not going to work because they're very sensitive. So we create these things called buffers, which are chemicals that neutralize small amounts of either an acid, base, or solution. So buffers can be added to neutralize it. Kind of think of a buffer as being a Rolaids if you need to neutralize the stomach acid. When you have a stomach ache, you take Rolaids or Tums. That's kind of like a buffer. It helps even out that. I think of a buffer as being a pillow. If somebody wants to hit you, if you're like playing around with your family members and you want to protect yourself from them, you put a pillow there so the hit doesn't feel as bad. That's a buffer. Okay, so that's your quick lesson, mostly on water, but some chemical things we need to understand the biomolecules we're going to be studying yet. So thanks, have a good night.